don't know what you don't know. And I know this from my own experience, and I now feel like I've got the right team around me.
There's a term I use all the time, diagnosis before prescription.
Especially in the digital world with ChatGPT, time is essentially what everyone pays for, right? Everyone pays for the convenience. Like, they're paying me for the time to do it, which is going to save them in the long run.
In a perfect world, we can help people avoid the mistakes in the first place.
We as mortgage brokers can't give financial advice or advice around investment, so we're strictly loan advice really.
And that can be really hard to advise when they don't know why they're doing it.
And a good analogy I think that applies to everyone at this table would be just compare a professional athlete with an amateur athlete. The amateur athlete might have a pro bono physio who's learning at the sporting club. They might have a coach who has a 9 till 5 Monday to Friday, but then the professional athlete will have a physio, a massage therapist, a dietitian, this and that, will have everybody around them. That professional athlete has got everything they need to be as successful as possible, and the same thing applies to property and to real estate.
Mark Twain said, if you're a lawyer, you're a fool to act on your own behalf.
I reckon with any of our professions, it's peace of mind as well as time that we give back to them.
We're here today discussing why serious investors need a team around them. So today we're going to be discussing the value of having a strong specialised team when it's investing in property, the unique roles, the expertise, the perspective that each of us bring to the investing journey. I'm Paul Snow. Here we have with us, I'll let you introduce yourself.
I'm Sophiana Pleotis. I'm the Director of Element Property Network.
Shane Fordham here, 8th House Property Advisory, working with investors.
Paddy Dwyer, so my business is Try Lending and I'm a mortgage broker.
Mitchell Falzon from the Geelong Agency. I'm a real estate agent and auctioneer.
All right, thanks for joining me today. I just wanted to have a serious discussion about investors, what separates them on the buying journey. I mean, it's obvious from a first home buyer's perspective, but I just wanted to get your thoughts on, what are the needs, what are the niches, all the specialties that they're looking for from each of our respective industries and professions. Just wanted to get your thoughts.
I think the best one to start this off is Paddy.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess, when it comes to investing and people understanding what is a possibility, it starts with how much they can borrow, because time, and you'll probably be able to talk more to it, you're not going to pay for a house fully in cash, so you need to borrow the funds from a bank, and so on that starting point. So working out what your borrowing capacity is, what sort of deposit you might need, and what's going to be the best solution for you. So I think probably the best place to start would be a mortgage broker.
I reckon there's a step back from that. I reckon it's finding out the investors understanding why they're investing in the first place.
Correct. Yeah, correct. I just had this conversation with someone yesterday. Is it so that you can sell it in 5 years' time and benefit from the capital gain, or is it something that you want to leave for your kids, or do you want a passive income when you retire? What is it that you want? And those conversations will probably go straight to somebody like Shane, or I was honestly thinking you were probably the best person to start this conversation, because as an investor, I think one of the big first questions that comes up is what's safe? What's the safest option for me? What's the less risk? What's, not going to bite me in the ass in 5 years down the track? That's where a conversation with yourself probably comes in handy as an investment advisor.
Well, in saying that, what are the major risks that investors are looking at when they're looking at the property market?
As a first-time investor, it's a little bit different for their journey as opposed to someone who's done it 2, 3, 4 times. The first-time investor, they have no idea what they're in for. They've just heard from family and friends that it's good to get into property. You need to make sure that you have this much money coming into the bank to pay your mortgage, and it's going to grow 10% every 10 years and all that stuff. But they're not talking about the emotional stuff that comes with it if your tenant is a couple of days behind in rent, or if they accidentally damage the property, or if they vacate earlier. Do they have a budget in place? Do they have maintenance scheduling set up in place? What happens if the hot water service breaks down? Do they actually have the funds put aside for that? Do they have the budget put aside for it? And can they actually maintain the holding costs while they're waiting for their capital to grow? And if they're starting at 1, are they doing it because mum and dad told them to, or their friend told them to, or are they doing it for generational wealth, or are they doing it for their family? And that's where a lot of the conversation that we start off with, even before we do a pre-purchase inspection, is asking those questions, because sometimes they don't even know where to start. When I'm talking to a seasoned investor, though, they've been through all that. They've made the mistakes. They understand where they need to start, what budget they need to put aside. And now they're looking at it as right, this is the goal. This is what I need to achieve. This is the tenancy risk or the risk that I'm prepared to take. And then this is what I'm looking for. So they're a bit more clued on because they've been through the hurt, they've been through the emotional roller coaster. And then after that, it's all just strategy.
Do you think they need to make those mistakes at the very start? I mean, it's hard for people not to get emotionally tied in, even when it's a commercial investor or a residential investor. Do they need to come across those hurdles at the very few first purchases in their portfolio to learn, okay, it's not about whether I like the area, whether, I want to live in it in the future? Because we all know investments are blue chips, they're 10, 15-year growth strategies. Do they need to essentially make some mistakes, or can they learn from a team of professionals at the very start not to, FOMO into a decision?
I think it's actually a really interesting point because people that have suffered the losses, people that have had a few bumps and bruises and I guess experienced the hard side of investing, they then value good advice. They understand the importance of having a professional team around them. It's a balancing act. We want to work with people before they make the mistakes, but sometimes before they've made the mistakes, they don't realize how important it is to work with someone who has already made the mistakes. So it's a really interesting point. It's a really tricky one. In a perfect world, we can help people avoid the mistakes in the first place. I think that's one of the main benefits of working with a team of professionals is, I guess, our role as experts in our own field is really to protect and almost be that client's insurance policy. Yeah. Property, it's a very powerful beast both ways. You get it right and it's incredibly rewarding. You get it wrong and it's a 6-figure mistake. So I always say to my clients, don't look at the professionals you work with as an expense. Look at them as an insurance policy against a 6-figure mistake.
Correct. And sometimes mistakes are inevitable. Sometimes a mistake could be defined as the market making a complete downturn because of the economic climate. But that's not a mistake. That's just the climate of the economy. Having a professional in your corner from the start, though, is just going to help you mitigate the chances of these mistakes coming up.
Yeah.
But you also don't know what you don't know. And I know this from my own experience. I'm now on my 3rd property purchase, and I now feel like I've got the right team around me. I probably already had the right team around me, but I didn't know what the ins and outs of it was until I'd experienced it myself. And I think that there is this level of, you can tell them all the things. You can tell them everything to mitigate their risk, mitigate their loss, but they're still going to make the mistakes because they don't know any different. It's like when someone first goes to a tax accountant, for argument's sake, and they get told everything that they need to do to structure it properly and this and that, and then they try to put it in practice and they're like, what are they talking about? Why do I need to do it? Why do I need to do this? And then it isn't until they grow or they learn more and then they're like, that advice that I got given 12 months ago, that's why they told me to do that now. And I think there is that level of, you can take it in, but unless you have real world context to why that can be really bad, it's like telling a kid not to put their hand on hot until they put it on hot and they're, okay, that's the reason why I'm not doing it. I think anything to do with money, finance, growth is all exactly the same because you really don't know what you don't know until you've been hurt.
It's interesting because there are a lot of property specific influencers popping up and doing online learning for how to invest and invest properly and looking at essentially the figures and see what works for you. I mean, to your point about the insurance policy, it's quite funny because I'll always tell clients, what's the difference between a conveyancer and a lawyer? Well, if we make a mistake, we've got public liability insurance. So you've always got that in peace of mind. I mean, you don't want to make that mistake because when we are providing that contract advice, we're crossing our T's and dotting our I's because we don't want to get sued. So that's the liability perspective on making sure that you have an adequately professional, qualified professional, whether it be a conveyancer who's done conveyancing for 15, 20 years or a lawyer who's been in the profession for 20 years. There's no more truism than you get what you pay for in this industry, whether it be a buyer's advocate, an investor, a real estate agent or a mortgage broker or a solicitor for that matter. And you'll get market rate for conveyancing because when you've got conveyancers fighting over fees, it's literally a race to the bottom. But I know that when I'm doing a file for a client, I'm spending more time than what the money I'm deriving, because I want to make sure that client's informed at every step of the way. And I'll say to my clients, no matter how versed they are in investing, whether it be a first home buyer or experienced commercial investor, is that there are no stupid questions. Because if that question in the back of your head is, oh, I don't know if I should ask that question, because it might lead to an answer that you may not have thought of. And then that's the insurance policy of having qualified experts around you. You know, I can think of doing a contract review recently where we went into the planning overlays and saved the client over 150 grand by not making the decision to buy. You know, and they're all obligation-free consults about providing peace of mind before signing on the dotted line. And, you know, that's part of the tagline and the ethos. But in those instances, and I'm interested to hear, like, what are some of the, where have you been able to, like, where have you witnessed mistakes or been able to save clients from making mistakes? Like, what are some examples that you can draw out?
I've rescued a lot of people after making mistakes. So after making mistakes, someone in my can of worms, someone's listed with an agent who hasn't been the right person to manage and take care of things. And I will actually say to that client is yes, you've made a mistake. But the good news is you've identified it and you won't make the same mistake again. You'll know who to choose, how to interview, XYZ, whatever it may be. And a good analogy, I think, that applies to everyone at this table and anybody who's watching this would be just compare a professional athlete with an amateur athlete. The amateur athlete might have a pro bono physio who's learning at the sporting club. They might have a coach who's, you know, has a 9 till 5, Monday to Friday. But then the professional athlete will have a physio, a massage therapist, a dietitian, a this and that, will have everybody around them. That professional athlete, no matter what genetics you have or whatever you have in your genetic bandolier of skills or whatever, that professional athlete has got everything they need to be as successful as possible. And the same thing applies to property and to real estate. For example, we're surrounded by each other, and we're all successful here at this table in our own right. And not one of us here can say we did it on our own. We did it with each other's support. You and I calling each other flat stick with XYZ in Port Arlington a while ago. You and I calling each other flat stick. You and I, like, trying to find clients a financial resolution to what they're going through, handing investors your way, and it all goes back and forth. So if someone wants to be dealing with property at the level of a professional athlete, they're going to make mistakes, but they're going to have the kind of people that would support a professional athlete around them, help them avoid mistakes, help them recover from mistakes as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a client about 3 years ago that you ask about, how do we help people avoid making mistakes? They lived in the northern suburbs of Melbourne, and bought their home, did really well with it, and thought, oh, let's do that again in the same suburb. It obviously worked. And I had a conversation. They didn't want to invest any more than, say, a couple of suburbs away from where they lived. And my role is to help them make the best decision, not just support what they already think they know. So we had quite a lot of deep conversations. And in the end, they ended up buying on the other side of the country. They bought in Perth when they didn't want to buy more than a couple of suburbs away in the northern suburbs of Melbourne. Now, in that time, they made over $200,000 a gain. I did a review after 2.5 years. They made just over $200,000 in gain. At the same time, in that same period where they wanted to buy, had gone backwards in growth. Yeah. So now all of a sudden they've gone from not only would have lost money, the door's open to go on a third one. Yeah. So these are the things that like you said, Mitch, about the athlete, when you've got professionals around you, those decisions, they can make massive, massive results. I talk about, we all know compound, everyone talks about compounding growth, compounding interest. We know those things. I talk about compounding decisions, and it's only one decision from me, one decision from you, one decision from each, like 5 decisions can make an unbelievable difference to a client's position and result.
That reminds me of Atomic Habits. You know, those 1% incremental habits each day lead to a profound effect in the long term, which is
true. And those habits are implemented from making a mistake. If I eat like shit for a week and don't set up my kitchen in a way so I eat better, I'm going to feel like shit. So I'm not going to do that again. So I'm going to change my habits, those little 1%. I'm not going to buy an investment property just because it's in my backyard and I like the neighborhood. Well, that wasn't a good choice. So next time I'll speak with a property advisor and make sure I'm purchasing the right areas.
That's a good point about the food. Was the mistake what you ate, or was the mistake that you didn't prepare before you ate the mistake?
Both.
Before you ate the mistake.
It starts from the preparation.
But you know what I mean? It's the mistake's not what you ate, is it?
Correct.
The mistake's actually because
The
you didn't plan
preparation
back
Well, it's
in.
that
planning.
saying, if you don't prepare, you're prepared to fail, right?
What Sophie was talking about at the start, the whole time my brain was going plan and preparation, plan and preparation. It's the two.
Well, one of the biggest advice discussions that I have with investors when they call for pre-purchase, because again, we don't buy for our investors. We pre-purchase and make sure that they're rent ready and that they're compliant and that it's going to perform in the way that they assume it's going to perform based on due diligence and all that. One of the biggest things that I say to them is call the selling agents and ask them who is buying in these areas right now. Because if there's all investors that are coming into an area, that may directly affect what the next 10, 20 years look like. But if they're going into an area that has first home buyers, downsizers, developers, renovators, all that, as a property manager, I don't get that information, but the selling agents have that. So even though they might think that they need one person, but they actually need another person. And that's where having a network and a collective of people who know where to point them in the right direction adds that 1% into their expertise and their knowledge to be able to make those right decisions.
You say it's a 1%er, but the result is a lot more than 1%, isn't it?
Where do you find, Paddy, people are coming to you with the wrong strategies?
Yeah, well, it sort of goes back to a little bit about risk. So when we talk strategies, we as mortgage brokers can't give financial advice or advice around investment. So we're strictly, loan advice really. And there's not so much risk mitigation, but it's more opportunity cost, I suppose. So if you go to the wrong broker or the wrong bank, the opportunity cost that you miss out on is whether or not you've maximized your borrowing capacity for the intended strategy. Maybe you're leaving a few $100,000, at the front door. So strategy from a lending standpoint is really dependent on what you guys kind of tell us. And how we structure it is probably more important, not so much for that first initial purchase, but it's for if we do have the plan to do 2 property purchases or 3, whether or not you're looking to buy inside of a trust. So then it becomes very important. It becomes important for me to understand what that future goal is. And also it comes back to the why, why you're doing things and what you want to do. I can't advise on any of that sort of thing. I will try to uncover what those whys are, but being able to have these people involved where they've kind of really done the hard work and found it out, then I can then try and just purely look at structuring and things and ultimately, what's going to be the best rate, I suppose, but more so what's that long-term goal and which banks and which solutions are going to best help sort of meet what these guys are doing.
And that can be really hard to advise when they don't know why they're doing it. That happens a lot. There's one that stands out, and at the end of the conversation, so she called me and said, hey, we're looking at purchasing in this area. Can you go and have a look at this property? And I always like to understand, their story, their journey. How can we help just to make sure that do they need a mortgage broker beforehand? Do they have pre-approval? All that stuff, because there's no point talking to a property manager until they've got all their ducks in the row. Do they have conveyance? All that sort of thing. Turns out she was looking at parking her money somewhere because she was just about to go through a divorce. And I was like, okay, this is like what we're talking about here is like step 15 in your process.
Get talking first.
You need to go and speak to a family lawyer, before anything.
Yeah, of course.
You need a team. Well, she needs a family lawyer. She needs an accountant. She needs a financial advisor. She needs a whole lot. And if you miss any of those pieces, that's a big mistake in itself.
The client investment journey is interesting in terms of onboarding and then, handing off to the next professional, because mortgage brokers and conveyancers and lawyers work hand in hand. And I'll constantly get questions from brokers about how can we maximize stamp duty savings? So a lot of people won't know, and you'll probably know in the area, we've got a regional, industrial and commercial stamp duty concession of 50% if you're buying a commercial property and you're using it for industrial or retail purposes, right? But you obviously need to qualify in postcodes, and being out in the Surf Coast area is brilliant because we're saving our clients 50% on stamp duty at settlement, and not a lot of people know about this cost saving. The government's then introduced a commercial industrial property tax regime where they're abolishing stamp duty and introducing a new tax, which is affecting settlements where if contracts aren't drafted correctly, it can go to what's called a complex assessment with the State Revenue Office and can delay settlement by up to 30 days. There is an escalation process because they know about this issue. But in terms of about the client onboarding journey, you always get those questions in terms of the price point. You know, I'll always get, and I'm very transparent with my fees. I know when clients are shopping around, I'll get the email and I'm like, yep, we do fixed fee conveyancing services. This is our set fee. We go holistic end-to-end obligation-free consult at the start to give you peace of mind. What's your best advice for investors who will prod and poke about your potential costs?
Well, I mean, I don't know that there's advice as such. I mean, the fee is there for a reason. You're not paying for just a few words at a couple of meetings. You're paying for years of experience, years of qualifications. We spoke before about the ability to help people make just one or two key decisions. That's really what they're paying for. And sure, jump on Google and you can find someone that's half the price, but we're talking about, in property, we're talking about what, $500,000, $1 million, a couple of $1 million.
Generational wealth, a legacy. I'll ask a question off that. What do you notice that's, like for me, for example, I'm a little bit more expensive than other agents. And I notice that my clients are very trusting, very, they understand the value in repainting their home or sort of staging their home, things that seem quite expensive on paper, but they understand the value. Is there something similar with you? The clients who come on board with you, do they have a different understanding of value or?
I find that a lot of our clients have come to us by referral. We don't do marketing, so it's all on referral.
Referral probably from clients who have been successful or?
Existing clients, and most of our client base are seasoned investors. So they haven't accidentally fumbled into inheriting a property or mum and dad investors. They're people that are on the wealth journey, and then they connect with us because we're also professionals that are on our own wealth journey and we talk wealth. Not to the point of financial planning, if you get what I mean, but we're all on that same journey, and then they connect and trust with that because we understand them, they understand us, and that already cuts through in the social media stuff that we do. We do a lot of education and all that. So I find that a lot of the conversations that I'm already having with clients, they already know what they're in for.
Yep.
So the conversation about price doesn't really come up. It does, however, come up when people are fee shopping. So if something comes in from Google and straight away they're like, hey, what are your fees? I'm like, I can help you get the cheapest fee somewhere else. But I cannot talk to you about service levels because we're not on that conversation right now. So are you looking for service levels? Are you looking for someone you can trust? If you're just looking for the cheapest property manager, absolutely. I'll find you someone who can offer you 12 months free management fee. Sometimes that then opens up another conversation, because I think when you're talking about service levels and trust and having that confidence in saying, we are the most cheap, like we are the most expensive selling agents in the area, but you wear that with pride and you know what you're worth.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we all are here and we all understand it, because we all deal with very similar clients that see the value in what we do.
It's like that meme you see where the guy's sitting underneath the ship and it said, you know, he fixed one nut in the. Oh yeah. And they say, yeah, how come you sent me a $200,000 invoice? He said, well, you didn't pay me to just fix the nut in the ship. You've paid me for my 20 years of experience.
There is $1 for the knock on the bolt and $199,000 for the experience. But I think it comes down to, I don't think the price itself is even a thing. It's the value attached with it.
Agreed. Yeah.
And interestingly, you use the word expensive, and you're not the most expensive.
But
You charge the most, but you're not the most expensive. Someone half your fee that gives a shit service, they are easily the most expensive out there, right?
Correct.
Correct. And this comes down to how people look at approaching things. There are people out there who are trying to cut every corner, save every dollar, and they're full of ego and want to do it themselves. There are others that understand the value of paying professionals and know that they'll get a better outcome.
And what's the one non-renewable resource that you save your clients so much on? The one non-renewable resource that you
Time.
100%.
Time's a big one.
And a seasoned investor will understand the value of that.
I think ultimately, especially in the digital world with ChatGPT, time is essentially what everyone pays for, right? Everyone pays for the convenience. Like, people can do their own conveyancing, they can get their own wills done, but they're paying me for the time to do it, which is going to save them in the long run, and the expertise to show them where they're going to save money in that long-term financial legacy. It's an interesting argument you said about, going out and doing it on your own. I've had clients tell me on a phone call, I'm just going to do this with ChatGPT, and I welcome that, because ultimately when it goes wrong, I'm going to make more money.
And it will go wrong.
And it will, because ChatGPT can't weigh in, the extrinsic circumstances. Like, they can't weight in what are the personal goals of the person. Yeah, it's going to get better in time, and it will replace a lot of the admin burden work that we do, but then we can leverage it to provide better value for clients and save them money in the long run. For you, Shane, people will go on realestate.com.au and they can, and like with the property influencers, they can do this. And, a question for you as well, Mitch, is, how do you think you leverage your knowledge to gain the best outcomes for the clients?
Yeah, it's a fair point. And I say to people all the time, you don't need my help to go and buy a property. If Paddy gives you the money, or the bank gets you the money, go and pick something. You don't need my help to do that.
Yeah.
But to strategically invest, to keep moving forward, to build a portfolio of properties and create that generational wealth that we're talking about, that's where leaning on someone that has experience, knowledge, resources to be able to compound results and decisions.
And seeing it firsthand as well, even if, like, I see the stuff that you do, we share an office, and I love walking past the office and seeing that even before he's caught up with the client, he's already, Shane, you're already looking at what is their 4-year strategy and how do they get to the second property and how do they do this. Like, there's so much thought process that goes into having a professional service that a lot of the people that are engaging in that service don't even know what those steps are because they haven't gone through that process before. And it's overwhelming for people at first. But for first time people that are going through this process, again, it's going back to they don't know what they don't know. And it's our job to communicate it to them in a way that they know what they're in for. So it's managing those expectations, understanding what the steps are. And if it's just a sit down, sign here and hope for the best, it's just going to create stress. Yeah, it's just full of danger, full of stress. It opens up a lot of questions because they're going to make their own decisions and their own mind up on what's going to happen next, instead of being guided through this is what it looks like. This is what the end result should look like. This is all the stuff that can happen in between.
I reckon with any of our professions, it's peace of mind as well as time that we give back to them, but it's peace of mind. Like, what I do isn't rocket science. And technically someone could go directly to their bank and maybe get a good solution, but it's that peace of mind knowing that they've definitely had a look at the whole market, reviewed their actual scenario and their goals, requirements, future objectives, and peace of mind knowing that they're on the right track to meet the goals that you guys have set and spoken about. And same with, like, technically they can go buy a property wherever.
Absolutely.
Or go on social media and find out.
They don't need any of us, but they'll get a better result if they use us, won't they?
I've tried to do your job and call a bank and negotiate my interest rate, and they've given me a better rate. I'm like, hold on, I know I can get a better rate elsewhere. Yeah. And I know I can get a better rate through a broker. But trying to do it yourself, they literally know they have the negotiating power. And there's an imbalance there. So they put it on you. They say, well, no, that's it. And I'm like, fine, I'll just refinance elsewhere. And I'll go to my broker and say, let's do a better deal. Like, what are some of the red flags you see when investors are trying to negotiate on a purchase?
The creme de la creme of mistakes I see investors making is mum and dad told me to buy here, or my grandfather bought here in 1960 and he's now, got $1 million in equity or 10 million. It's like just mum and dad, my uncle. It's like, oh, please stop.
It's actually interesting because when I was 19, mum got me to invest in an apartment in Kingswell, and I got pretty lucky because I was a one better, and the Department of the Minister for Housing got someone who was on a disability pension from the Veteran Affairs. I had it for about 6 to 8 years, but I recognise then, studying what I study and do what I do, I look at properties a bit different, similar to you guys. And I said to mum, equity's tapped out here. I'm selling and moving my investment strategy elsewhere. And she tried to convince me to keep it. And I said, yeah, but I've kept it for about 8-10 years. There's no point keeping it for any longer. It's just going to be giving me more rent. And if the market goes down, it's gone. It's just a one-bed apartment. It's not going to do much more. And it's interesting that what we saw the market do during COVID, where people started really evaluating their own lives and their investment strategies, and they stopped buying multi-complex apartments and started looking at interstate opportunities. And like, for example, solo practitioner lawyers are restricted from acting cross-jurisdictionally unless we've got head offices in different states. But I know my best investment strategy is to look interstate, because investment properties in Victoria are just taxed way too heavily. Now, what's your opinion on advising client? Like, I'll advise a client if they're not the right fit to go elsewhere, and I'll refer them out to someone who's adequately qualified. Like, I just referred a client for a purchase and sale in Queensland to a Queensland solicitor that I know that's really well regarded.
I do that all the time. So because investors are looking at certain price range, yields, capital growth projections, all that, they already come to me with all that information. And that same projection that they're looking at isn't just in one area. They can achieve that in other areas. And I know that because I get educated by other property managers and other areas across the region. And there are places in Queensland, New South Wales, WA, that all are achieving similar price points. And so they come to me and they say, oh, we're starting to get a little bit priced out of what we thought because this market's moving really quickly. And then I'm like, well, would you like to speak to another property manager in other areas? Have any other areas come up in your radar? And they're like, oh, actually, we've been looking at this suburb or this suburb. And I'm like, cool, let's connect you. Because again, it's not about us. It's about them and being able to achieve that. And I think if we always go in with their best interest in mind, it makes everything flow so much better.
So sometimes I get frustrated with the amount of detail I'd have to walk a client through, because I'm like, okay, now I'm reviewing sale authorities for agents. I'm like, I could really jeopardize my relationships with agents if I go too hard on asking for amendments on an exclusive sale authority, right? So I'll guide a client on how to negotiate successfully, not just with their own sales agent, because listen, the sales agent's acting in your best interest. Just like we have fiduciary duties to always act in our client's best interest. I think that's what people forget when they're thinking about the transaction. Like, it's just not a transactional relationship. Like, when I see a client coming to me for whatever type of matter, I'm thinking, okay, I'm building a relationship with them for the long term. So if it means I have to go to the length of, reviewing draft emails to agents or leveraging selling agents to then get what a client wants, then we do that, right? Like, especially when we're talking pre-settlement repair costs or getting special conditions into contracts. Not many people know in 2018-19, the estate agents regulations sunsetted, which meant the whole swag of general conditions, standard general conditions in contracts, was a free-for-all. So we see penalty provisions in contracts all the time for rescheduling settlement or default costs being broadened for vendors so they can claim more damages. One I saw recently was from a solicitor in Werribee, and I won't name names for defamation reasons. But, they had snuck into the end of their contract without a heading an abandoned goods clause, which meant that the vendor could leave their rubbish at the property, basically. So anything that the vendor had left behind, the purchaser couldn't get cleaned. And I'm thinking, this is a lawsuit for a conveyancer or a lawyer waiting to happen, because if they don't pick up on this condition, so I'm like, all right, memory bank, whenever you see that lawyer's contract, that condition needs to be removed. And
no, honestly, it's actually not that good. Go. Please go.
Sorry.
This question's going to be for Mitch and for Paul. I've been seeing more and more often that selling agents have been offering a building and pest inspection, and it's already pre-made and pre-done to offer to buyers. What are your thoughts on that?
Look, I love it on paper. It's a great idea. Genuinely, if in a ideal world, I would have every client do it. But in the real world, I'm going to say to a purchaser, hey, we've got a building and pest inspection done for you already. And generally speaking, they're not going to be too trusting. they're going to want to do their own building and pest inspection. And because I don't do that, what usually happens is they'll say, hey, Mitch, I'm going to do my building and pest inspection. And I will always say to them, look, I'm happy for you to choose your own. There is one in Geelong. We don't allow to do building and pest inspections anymore, but that's another topic. We'll allow you to choose your own. Here's the one we don't allow. Take a pick from wherever you like. And if they ask my recommendation, I'll always make very clear, here's multiple, and I get no financial benefit from any of them. Just making that very clear.
What's the benefit of doing it just to save time? Is that the
pre-sale one? Well, I think there's a benefit when there's a home that clearly needs some work, and there's clearly going to be some questions are going to come up. And clearly whoever buys it is probably going to want to do a building and pest inspection, unless they're a builder themselves or whatever it may be. So that's where on paper it's a great idea, but there's the trust component that comes into it afterwards.
Absolutely.
That kind of defeats the ideal scenario.
I mean, you've got the vendor saying to the building inspector, can you prepare an inspection for me because I'm really hoping to sell this?
Yeah.
You got the buyer saying, can you do an inspection for me because I want to make sure I'm not going to, buy a bloody lemon.
Whoever you're contracting with, that person's acting on your behalf.
Theoretically, the report should be identical no matter what, but it's not. It's not going to be.
Okay, and it's interesting. The LIV actually changed their contract conditions on the building report. Instead of saying major structural defect, they've just said major defect, because there was arguments throughout the profession: does a major defect identified on a report, does it also interchangeable with major structural, or is it just major? And that's the newer version of the contract that came out in June. So what we're finding is that vendors are asking us to carve out their liability on building and pest reports where they're getting it pre-contract, right? So that's troublesome as well, because you can't contract out of your legislative rights. And so we see conditions about, Section 27s, or where conditions operate in the benefit of one party over the other. Everyone forgets that under Australian consumer law provisions, you've got this unfair contracts term regime, which has never really been tested in conveyancing, because literally who's got money to go to court in a conveyancing transaction, right? No one's going to throw money at it. There might be a precedent set one day, but we see unfair contract terms all the time. And the danger with getting your pre-contract building and pest is you've got this negotiation tactic now. Whereas when you sign the contract and you had latent defects that don't amount to that major structural defect or major defect, the discretion was with the vendor whether they would agree to repair or compensate the purchase for those items. If you get it pre-contract, there's now this new negotiating power in favour of the purchaser where they can ask for further discounts on the purchase price to satisfy those repairs. I've even had some clients come to me and say, well, my bank said the house is inhabitable based on the building and pest, so they're not going to lend me the money. So all of a sudden there's this massive negotiating tool. And I don't know how often. Have you ever come across that?
Yeah, it's happened a little bit, but it has to be in a pretty bad state for that to happen. And it depends really if the person has enough cash savings to do the work required to get it fixed up and up to speed, then it's no real issue. You just have to get it approved. But a lot of the time people are exhausting all their cash to be put into the purchase or the deposit. So they don't have the amount that might be needed to fix up the toilets and all the rest of the things that are severely wrong with the property. But it's pretty rare, I'd suggest.
I mean, how often do you see in your roles that you're looking to protect the long-term strategy for the investor in terms of, you're building that relationship for a conveyancer or a lawyer? It's okay. They've done their purchase. Let's look at their asset protection. Let's do their wills and estate planning. Like, what's your next then tool to help them with their long-term goals?
Well, for us, it's all about how do we help people keep moving forward with property? How do we help them build a portfolio of properties? Because I'm certainly not interested in having just a transactional relationship with people. I say to people right up front, my role here is to make sure that you can buy a second, a third, or fourth property, not just buy one. So I think you spoke before about why are we doing that and what's the big picture, what's the long-term goal. We really have to understand that before we can actually even talk about what's the right solution. There's a term I use all the time, diagnosis before prescription. And like diagnosis before prescription is absolutely incredibly important in the medical world, but it's equally as important, I think, in all of our fields, because unless we actually know what it is we're trying to solve or achieve or fix, how can we confidently make a recommendation? The problem I see in property investment is people start with they find what's the best looking prescription. Oh, that's a shiny strategy, or that's a beautiful brochure, or that worked for my friend Rick. But it might not be the right strategy for them. And the analogy I use is it's like, Mitch, you walk into the doctor's next week because you got a problem. Imagine the doctor's already got the prescription filled in. Yeah. You'd walk straight back out the door. But this is the problem in property investment. We see so often the prescription's already filled in. Yeah. Whether you go through to come to my office, well, it's not my office, but one size fits all. And that's the equivalent.
So much FOMO. Yeah. There's so much FOMO.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of like, but I need 10 properties, or I need this, or I need that to be able to retire by 45 or 50 or whatever. And it's like,
and I think the mass media plays a bit of a role in that as well.
100%.
Oh, absolutely.
Like you get the RBA announcement and you get the whole newsletter emails with the same subject line. And I think it's that fear mongering to get that emotional reaction, because we are emotional beings. We're all going to make decisions on that basis in some stage.
And also social media as well. Like you have to have no credentials to be on there talking about investments and things. And they're the ones that probably have the flashy cars.
And it's nearly financial advice, which is technically...
It worries me that. Yeah.
Well, the thing is about giving financial advice is I'm in an unregulated space. I can get on camera and say and do whatever I want. No one to answer to, which is crazy.
Yeah, I can walk into someone's living room and tell them a whole bunch of lies about the market and about how I got this, did this strategy for this house, and get them to sign on the dotted line. There's nothing they can do about it afterwards if I've spoken out of my ass.
I had a client recently.
It's ridiculous.
And I do prod and poke about, okay, why are you buying? Like, what are you using this property for? Because we have to go back, look into the planning overlays, look into the covenants that may be restrictions on land. You might have only, the government announcement about, 10 business days to get a planning permit. I'm involved with policy work at the Law Institute of Victoria. We see the draft legislation that comes out. Not a lot of people know you've got one dwelling covenants as restrictions on land. So then all these legal concepts come about because you have to amend and or vary that covenant, which is done either through a planning approval process or you're going straight to the Supreme Court, which is ridiculous amounts of money. But we're prodding the question, okay, what are you using this for? Do you want to develop? Is it a knockdown rebuild? Do you want to subdivide, or are you living there? I had a client recently that basically just told me, we really want to get into the property market and we love this property, and it was in Malvern. Now, I don't know how many conveyancers or solicitors are going into and looking at the marketing material, going ahead and then looking if there's a building permit, looking at the builder's reputation, going to VCAT's jurisdiction and see if there's any cases listed against that builder. And then I'm looking at the VBA disciplinary record to see if there's any proceedings from the VBA, not that they're not like the Queensland Building Commission. They're restructuring so they get a bit more stronger. But, I'm going to that absolute length to say, I picked up recently on a contract review, I looked at the marketing material and there was a crack in the wall for a strata title with apartments. And I said to the client, has the building inspector assessed the structural nature of that crack? Oh, no, my buyer's advocate said it was fine. I said, well, hold on, let me have a look at the title. I could see that the purchaser had bought the property 3 years ago. She said, oh no, the purchaser actually mentioned they saw the crack then. I'm like, so why are they selling 3 years from the original purchase if they knew there was a crack there? All of a sudden there's red flags, So it's important, like you said, is to go to that why. And I basically helped her make an emotional decision to steer away. And now she's found another property in Windsor that's a lot better suited. It's actually changing from an old stratum title to a strata title, which is going to increase the value of her property significantly in the long term. So, in terms of those investment strategies, it's important that they do have a team around them.
I had a similar experience to that, but the polar opposite. And I won't name addresses or names because it's still on the market, but I had an apartment on the market, doesn't have the best reputation through Geelong. Buyer came through the property, made an offer, something popped up in the contract, and her conveyancer filled her with doom and gloom. Like just completely, was not from the area, by the way, didn't even know the apartment complex, but just ragged on the property, ruined the reputation of it. Buyer was shit scared and completely walked. And I said, can I just ask for one favor here? One favor. Speak with a local conveyancer, and I'll give you a few options too. Choose one of them and ask for their opinion on what's going on. She contacted this local conveyancer. We signed contracts a week later. She was happy. The local conveyancer said to her, well, this is actually what's going on in Geelong. Gave her all the proof, all the evidence, all the names, all the contacts, all the networks. It was someone that we know as well. They referred them on to people that we know too, and they were taken care of and the deal got done. So even just having that local knowledge, this woman was about to not buy a property, which I'm telling you right now was great value. It was cheap, if anything. The seller was unfortunately in their position quite desperate, and she was almost going to lose out on a really good opportunity to buy a really cheap property because of.
And that's one thing that one of the feedback things that I get from my property managers and my team is they have never worked in another agency where the property managers look at the building and pest inspections. So we actually had to do more training and around how to read the building and pest and what things to look out for and all that. And the reason why we started doing that was when buyers get the building and pest, they think, oh, wow, there's a lot of work here. Or they look at it and they're like, nah, everything's fine because it just comes up as minor defect. So, but we look at it from a maintenance and repair and improvement point of view because we have to look at maintaining it long term. And there's a lot of building and pest that I look at, and we start with quoting the works right away. So then we can say, look, you don't have to do this right away, but it's already been pointed out that this work needs to be done. But it's nothing that needs to be done right now that is going to affect your renters. It's not going to affect your rental price that you're going to get, but it's maintenance that has to get done at some point. So over the next 3 years, let's budget this aside. And then once they look at that, they're like, oh, okay, it's not as scary as what I thought. No. When you start to break.
Initially, it looks scary, but once you break it down with a professional.
Red. Oh no, this is a big problem. It's like, well, no. Like we had one that they thought that it was going to cost them about $10,000 to $12,000 to fix. We got the quote in. It was $2,500 to $3,000.
It's funny you say that. Like we had that Lacrosse Tower blow up in the city, a couple of years ago now, where essentially the whole building and construction industry was using combustible cladding, and it's a big no-no. Like under the National Construction Code and the Building Act, you cannot use combustible cladding, and they were just getting cheap cladding from China and putting in apartment towers. Now the government's actually basically self-funded the litigation role and said, we will fund the replacement of cladding where this applies. So I've looked at contracts and seen these notices, and I've said, and clients have been completely scared by it. And I've actually said, well, it's better the devil you know than the devil you don't know, because ultimately, if that's your market, if you're buying in this if you're looking at an apartment or a unit and they don't have a cladding notice, you don't know whether it exists or not, because you're not going to council and pulling out the plans. You can't go to the builder and ask them for the plans because they're going to say, well, for privacy reasons, we don't have to disclose it to you. So to actually know that it's getting rectified and remedied is going to save them more money in the long term, because then when they sell, whoever buys can buy with that security and peace of mind that there's no combustible cladding, which means the whole tower won't blow up. There's time bombs sitting in the city that no one knows about, which is scary. But I think your point, like local knowledge is extremely important, which is why I've always been envious of buyer's agents, because I know they go travel interstate. Like lawyers rarely ever travel interstate unless it's for a conference, right? Family lawyers love going overseas for their conferences. But, you go interstate and tap into that local knowledge, which is why it's important to have the ability to pick up the phone to a local building inspector and have that conversation. How do you find the best way to tap into local knowledge in those interstate markets?
Well, we have everything we do is research based. You used the word before, evidence. And everything we do has to be backed up by research and data. Now, fortunately, there's so much that can be done now digitally. We don't actually necessarily have to have our feet on the ground in terms of the research and the data. But really it's about aligning what's happening in a particular market. What are sort of the key metrics and fundamentals behind the market, aligning that back into someone's risk profile, goals, budget, all those sorts of things. Look, the reality is nobody knows everything about everywhere, but I guess our approach is saying, first of all, understanding what are the key metrics that we need to make sure we've got in our favor. And I talk about like scales. Every item that is a critical or important part of ensuring something's a good investment. Let's isolate it. Let's make sure we've got that on the right side of the scales. It doesn't have to be perfect, but we need to have it in our favour. And we go through all the different things, and there's the whole list of them. And when we get a tick next to every one of them, when we get them all on the right side of our scales, it's like the scales are in our favour. It's like the casino. They don't lose. The odds are in their favour. And I talk about that same analogy with our clients is all of the things that can go right and wrong. Let's get them in the right side of the scales. We don't have a crystal ball. There is no guarantees, but we're doing everything we possibly can to make sure you're going to get a really good result. It's going to work for you. It's going to be able to be held, because what's the point of the best property and the best strategy if you can't bloody hang on to the thing? That it fits into your world and you can actually hang on to it, long enough to achieve or realize the gain. So research and data is everything. You spoke about emotions before. We're emotional beings, us humans. We have, my role is, when I say to people, I'm going to try and make this as boring as I can. It's tongue in cheek, right? But we don't want people making emotional decisions.
Yes. Yeah.
It has to be around the numbers. It has to be around the data.
Or how often do you see it in your profession with people essentially trying to etch that extra bit or borrow some money, the family guarantee, the bank of mum and dad?
Yeah, it's funny because I was going to ask about emotion because when we were on a podcast, was asked about emotional purchases and emotional sellers, but where I kind of think I work a lot with first home buyers, so that is their owner occupied primary residence, so it's a lot more likelihood of them being emotionally invested in it.
The first property, they're emotional.
Massively emotional. And that's where the bank of mum and dad might come into it, where they put in a little bit of extra more money. A lot of the time with first home buyers, they are sort of maxing out their borrowing capacity. So simply going back to the bank and asking for more is not really an option, but they are still emotionally invested in it. So that's when they do try to get mum and dad involved. But on the investment side of things, I was going to ask Shane about it, was how emotional are they? Like, when they see all the numbers and it all stacks up and for whatever reason, emotionally not invested in a property, or...
Investors aren't emotional.
No way. It's interesting. So the best way I would love to be able to present property to our clients when it finally comes to the point of making the recommendation is handing it to them with no photos of the property, no address, no suburb, just here's the numbers. And of course we don't do it that way, but that would be actually the way.
That would be a really great way to present it.
I have done it.
Investment property Tinder. Just the basic information. Swipe right or left. Then we'll tell you.
There's a scratch for the
There's an
photos.
app for you.
That's fun.
Cut that part out. Don't share it with anyone.
But it's that
is fun.
It's true. We really want to be making the decisions without those emotions, and even it's interesting now that like Victoria has been probably one of the worst areas to invest the last 4 or 5 years. It's now coming back onto the radar. It's now purely from a growth perspective, it stacks up quite well. But because most of my clients are from Geelong or Melbourne, when we start talking about these suburbs that they're familiar with, there's a whole layer of, no, my ex-girlfriend was from there. I had a car accident in that suburb.
Through there one time.
Yeah.
It's a superstition.
Oh, that house had some bad tenants there once. They've moved out like 3 times over.
Mum and dad have told me about
it. It happens, but like I don't say it in these ways, but that's ridiculous. Like let's remove those preconceived ideas or prejudices or experiences. But they inevitably becoming. We're emotional beings. Like I guess it's a balancing act between acknowledging those experiences or feelings and making sure they're not using them getting in their own way.
But there is so much subconscious emotion that comes with property and with money. So it doesn't matter how many purchases they've done, how far into their investment journey they are, they will always have emotion tied to it, because if something goes wrong, that's their generational growth. That's their child that isn't going to be able to buy their first home. That there's so much that's tied into everything. So even though we generally work with more investors that are there to invest, there is always emotion that's going to be tied to it no matter what. Yeah. And I know that with me, I have people saying, oh, if you are purchasing investment properties, you would just manage them yourself, right? No. I get the team to do it because I know with myself that for me, even though I'm not living in the home, that is still part of my financial life.
Yeah.
And finances for me, as much as I try to completely just shut off, it's life, right? So there is emotion that's attached to it no matter what.
Oh, Mark Twain said, if you're a lawyer, you're a fool to act on your own behalf. So
Absolutely.
you're too emotionally tied.
Well, you are, and it's decades, more decades for me than you guys, of beliefs, experiences, stories, thoughts, fears. As much as you think you can separate it and you just use your professional side of it doesn't.
One of my biggest fears with getting into an investment, I don't know if anybody shares this, but is not having the liquid in the bank account, like to just when something comes up to spend it.
Like rainy day funds.
Yeah, my fear is like, what if I need that money and it's locked up somewhere? Like we've all got these fears.
The bank will just exercise their power of sale and take your property. It's fine.
Really quickly. They'll hear that thought. Go, I think we should sell this out.
My mum was telling me the returns she was getting from her financial planner, and I won't name names. They're on the other side of town. And I said, well, introduce me. Like, I want to see what he can do for me. And I actually made one of those decisions just on the numbers. I looked at the plans. It was a 3-bedroom townhouse in Somerville. I think I would have been about 22, 23 when I just first met my wife. And I was like, Mom, this is a good investment. I keep it for 10 years. I'm going to make a fair bit of quid here. Bought it sight unseen. Never went and visited the property. Hired property managers who actually weren't working on my behalf because they tried get me to pay for the internet connection from the pole. I'm like, well, there's no requirement for me to do so. And I pay your management fee. So no. And they ended up forking out the cost for it, which was quite interesting because I was a budding young.
We'll talk about that later. Yeah.
Well,
okay.
and this is what's funny. Like in terms of legislation now, like we're talking 10 years ago, right? Like legislation now, I think hasn't caught up with the vagrancies of conveyancing because you've still got a telephone connection on your vendor Section 32 statement. Why is it?
Ain't no one got a telephone connection. No one has
have
an
a
antenna
telephone,
anymore.
The only person calling you
I
is a
even forgot about telephones.
is a telemarketer, right? If you have a phone connection, it should have whether the place has internet or not, right? Whether it has Opticom or different service provider, but you never know that now. But yeah, I made one of those financial decisions, and it set me up because I was able to flip it and make what I needed to do to pay a deposit on a land in Torquay when we first invested in 2015. And so, like, when you're in the profession, you can look at the financials a lot differently. Like in Torquay in 2015, I worked out that people were selling and making 100, 200 in 2015. And I'm like, holy crap! If I don't get in on the market now, and I did on land, 12 months later the land was already 150k more, and that was the pre-COVID boom. Like, so there's already capital growth there. So when you're looking at the numbers, I think your point stacks up for commercial investors is that it really is a numbers game. You know,
Oh, absolutely.
you don't have to see the property. You just have to know that it's a solid investment, you know.
And having someone who understands the numbers, it's there's no shortage of numbers and information out there, but being able to understand it, being able to tear it apart and actually have it make sense is really, really important. You spoke about ChatGPT, like you can plug anything in and get any report, any research, any data, whatever you want. But if you don't actually understand how to quantify it all, what's the point?
I think you can all leverage technology to your own advantage in any profession, but it's about then using it in the right context with the right client, you know.
I think everything we've sort of been talking about reminds me of a core belief I have about property investment, and that is that it's a business. People come at me all the time on social media. It's not a business. It's a human, need and all this sort of stuff. And housing is, shelter is, but we and I instruct coach our clients that treat this as a business, and any successful business has a team of professionals in it.
If I told you could own a business in your backyard or own a business in Perth, and the business in Perth is going to make you $200,000 more, which business are you going to choose to own? You're not going to choose to own the one in your backyard because it's nice and you like a little bit of charity and be in the community. No. You're going to make 200 grand extra if you can.
Well, if someone wants to make, if the making the money is the highest priority, but that's where that diagnosis is important, because if the highest priority is, I want to be able to walk to my shop, well, buy it in your backyard. But if your highest priority is, I want to make the most money, well, it's not in your backyard.
Of course, absolutely. But in our case with property investing, they're investing in property to make money or a legacy or whatever.
Well, I think ultimately as well, that's that legacy component, because when you're getting to that mature age, you're married with kids, I worry for the message that it sends to kids about, e-commerce and influencer status and deriving money that's out in the ether, right? Like we're talking BTC, Ethereum, altcoins where people are now making a lot of money on. But that message is getting lost about building financial legacy for future growth and then passing it on.
I was having this exact same conversation with one of my best mates yesterday. And I said, why are you buying this property? And what we see on social media is everyone buying Bitcoin or something. And then all of a sudden, 2 years later, they're sitting in Dubai, living in the Burj Khalifa and having this wild life. That's not a common occurrence. Most people are investing in property and investing in anything, I think predominantly for their legacy. I think that's usually where things will head towards, or the people who are going to reap the most benefits are probably going to be your legacy. Yeah.
And I think because it's been around for generations and their family have also done it, it's comfortable.
Yes, correct.
It's very, very comfortable. It's bricks and mortar. You can touch it, see it, feel it. Yeah, it is. It's absolutely tangible. Where going into stocks and shares and Bitcoin and all that sort of thing, the risk profile when you're looking at investing in property versus investing in something that goes up and down and is a huge emotional roller coaster, very, very different. And there's a different wealth mindset and education that comes with that as well.
Well, we saw the government's reaction to Metricon nearly going under. They basically bailed them out, just like they bailed out the banks when it caused the GFC, right? So I think ultimately the property market can't fail, and the government will never let it fail. You've got both a macro and a microeconomic policy, and I won't go too deep into that, but essentially the fluctuation of an illiquid market with the ASX or the Bitcoin market, one decision by Trump and that market's gone. Elon Musk and Trump are now punching on, so that's making mass media headlines, and people are all worried about what's going to happen with their, essentially people who put all their eggs in one basket in that market will lead to anxiety, depression, and suicide. And it's been shown, like during the GFC, multimillionaires lost money overnight and were jumping off roofs, So when you're talking about long-term investment strategies for investors, it is that legacy component that they can bank on the equity growth. And even if the market does crap itself, it won't come back to zero. They've still got that asset there to realize.
Has anyone here read Trading in the Zone by Mark Douglas? He was a huge day trader back in the 90s, and he's written a book that's literally about the psychology of trading. And it's just all of the literal science-backed psychology of it and how he's trained people. And there's a lot of psychology in investing. Yeah. That is, like you said, for example, in GFC, like a lot of people were taking really drastic measures when they lost a lot of money overnight. You need to be patient through those times. Like investors are very patient, successful investors are very patient people, very intelligent people, people who can look at the big picture. You can look at like a chess game, they can look at move 15 down the track. They're looking at everything in a big picture scale, like running a business. So there's a lot of psychology that goes into becoming an investor, and we can't teach them that psychology either. A lot of it comes from experience, comes from just getting out there and getting on the field and making a couple of mistakes, but increase your probabilities of making the right choice by having the right professionals.
Yeah, there's always, that saying, comparison is the thief of joy. Yeah. Like I remember when my non bought a caravan in Dramana instead of buying a house. You could have bought a whole street back then. We would have been multimillionaires. I know Europeans who did, right? And the Greeks and the Italians that came over back in the 60s. We bought a caravan. But ultimately, hindsight's always a beautiful thing because you can always look back on lost opportunities. But if you can educate yourself enough with the right team around you to make smart choices, then hindsight you're not even going to worry about, because at the end of the day you're still going to be ahead of the people who haven't made those decisions.
And there's a threshold as well. When I started the business, so I was very comfortable in property. When it came to business, that was a whole different mindset within itself. And you learn a lot about yourself during that time. You learn a lot about what things you're comfortable with and what your own mindset things come with it. And one of my mentors said to me that, because I was so risk averse when it came to spending money or losing money, because I came from a background of making sure that there was always food on the table for family and all that. So this whole thing with risk and money. And one of my mentors said to me, the first $5 that you lose is going to prepare you for the $10 you're going to lose. That $10 that you lose is going to prepare you for the $50 that you lose. And it just keeps going up. You might lose 50,000 one day, and that's going to prepare you for the 100,000 that you're going to lose. And it just keeps going up, because your threshold changes as your experience changes.
Correct.
And then your risk profile changes as your
Your
experience
goals
changes
change,
as
your
well.
intentions of it change, everything changes.
I'm always testing clients how risk averse they want to be, because it's like, well, this is like we're advising you on worst case scenarios because we don't want to get sued. So like we're telling you this could happen, but on the potential side of things, there's a benefit.
Yeah, and we talk about those sort of things, and I kind of lump that into investor muscle, we call it. Yeah. You know, it's the same as an athlete, same as a business person. Once you've been through the ringer a couple of times, you've been around and had a couple of wins, a couple of losses, you start to develop that muscle. And you mentioned psychology, that is probably the most important part of it.
It's the most exciting part about it.
Well,
It's interesting to learn.
the property stuff, and I say this without being flippant about it, that's the easy bit. But managing someone's emotions, mindset, you know, that is the bit, and that's actually the bit I love the most.
Do you know how many astute investors I speak with who are actively making a mistake when I'm on the phone with them? And we're talking about a mistake of $50,000 to $100,000, and they're talking to me like they're talking about footy on the weekend, like they're talking so casually. And I'm like, wow.
We do. Our clients, like, you talk to a landlord and tenant clients sometimes, and it's like talking him off a bridge. It's like I strongly recommend. And when I get the language, I like, as your lawyer, it behoves me to advise you. It's like, mate, please listen to me. Like, you're making a mistake.
But there's some that are the polar opposite. They're actively losing tens of thousands of dollars, and they're just calm about it. Not they don't care. It's like they've done it. They understand, and they probably have the people in their corner as well that they can reach out to.
It's the risk and the reward. They can see that the reward. Yeah.
They know they're going to come out on top, and it's like the casino. They don't jump up and down and pull their hair out if they lose a couple of grand one night, or that they go up and down and up and down. And one of my best mates is a professional gambler. Like that's his thing. He hasn't had a job. That's his, and I lived with him for a couple of years, and I used to go down and just sort of watch him sort of trading. And there's races he would win 10 grand. There's races he'd lose 5 grand, and emotion just stayed the same. And he knows that over the course of a month, he knows he's coming out on top.
That's his job, right? Like, he doesn't need those commercials.
No, but he knows, and he's probably better paid than any of us sitting here, I can assure you. Maybe not you. But you know, he knows that he's got his systems, he's got his structure, his mindset's right. It's just part of the game. You win some, you lose some. He knows he comes out on top.
I've got a mate like that, and he puts these multis on, and I'm like, I can't even put a multi on for the life of me.
If he's a multi, he's not a professional gambler. If he's multi, and who's a mug? Who's a mug?
He offsets. He risk averse, so he offsets his bets.
It's
crazy.
you, isn't it?
No,
You're the bloke from the multis.
No.
That's my mate Snowball.
That's my childhood trauma.
Wait, what's that
hate
thing?
gambling.
How much are you prepared to
I
lose?
hate gambling. I hate it. I can't stand it. Like, I can't put a bet on a footy because it ruins the game.
I can't.
Yeah, that's why I don't do
I
it.
just never win money.
I'll do it for the grand final to make it interesting.
But with the emotional side of things, and back to AI, this is a thing that AI, I don't think will ever be able to take away, which is managing stress, emotions, and keeping everyone level-headed.
And it's been proven recently that AI does understand the language that you're putting into it, and it knows what bias and what answer you're preferring to hear, and it will give you an answer.
What we've seen the disastrous effects that it can have on children, right, in terms of them using AI as a relationship tool. And it does. It picks up on your biases and what you're feeding it, because it's generative learning, right? So, like I said, there's a place for it, but ultimately, I think in our respective businesses, there's a place for the human-to-human relationship. Like, a lot of people will say to me, "Aren't you scared AI is going to replace your jobs?" And I was having this conversation with some real estate agents recently. Like, no, aren't you concerned more than us? And I'm like, well, not really, because I run a trust account that runs sometimes $4 million through that trust account to buy a property. Are you going to trust an AI app to put $4 million? Because then if that gets lost, who are you suing? Are you suing the manufacturer who's off in Japan or Dubai? You can't sue anyone. If I lose that money, yeah, you can sue me, and I should. When I make a mistake, I'm accountable. I put my hand up.
Talking about dealing with AI or people here, I think the most enjoyable part of working together is just the personal relationships that we have. Like, I love my job because the journey of it, calling up you guys or calling up a client and having a quick gas bag between talking about offers and just having a laugh and enjoyable experience, that's the number one reason why I think you need people in your corner. Because otherwise you're on your own, behind a computer, doing it on your own. It's depressing, it's sad, you're making mistakes, you're screaming at yourself, you've got no backboards, nothing.
But some of the outcomes you get for clients as well, like you can hear it when they're so grateful to have you on their side. And like for me, that's value enough. Like I was in legal policy talking to MPs with like butting my head against a brick wall. Like I love that job, but I find I inherently value the outcome I get for clients when I can hear the appreciation in their voice. And then you know that you've done the best by them in terms of service delivery. And it's no longer transactional. Like unfortunately, I get really close with my clients. We'll talk about footy and eventually they'll pass away. And so I take that on board. And that's part of the reason why I don't do family law, is because there's a lot of vicarious trauma in that area of the profession. So when clients pass away, it's not that I take it personally, but I just think about how much stuff we spoke about doing together, like whether it go to the footy or go for a fishing trip. And I just think, life's too short to not make hard and fast decisions. And if you're not living life for yourself, then who are you living life for, right?
Well, it's interesting you say there about, if a client passes, you really feel it, because with the roles we're in, we're probably having some of the deepest conversations they're having, we're talking about their future, their goals, their fears, relationship with parents, what they're trying to achieve for their children. Like, it's not uncommon that the client sits across from me and there's, tears. And that's what a privilege to be able to get deep sort of conversation.
We know a lot of things, and I say we all do, that about our clients that they aren't comfortable even sharing with their family and friends, because sharing things about money, finance, property, that's an uncomfortable conversation if someone within their family or friend space isn't on the same page on. There's a lot of tall poppy syndrome that can come with it, and people want to be able to talk about their fears, their triumphs, all that,
No judgment.
without judgment.
Yeah.
So we do tend to get to know our clients very, very intimately. Yeah.
Extremely well.
You mentioned that non-judgment. I'm gonna steal a quote from a financial planner in Geelong that we all know, and he spoke about our superpower as advisors is being able to be able to look at things quite unemotionally, non-judgmentally, because it's almost impossible for a person to be able to look at the situation that way. And I love that. I thought it really is a superpower of all of us to be able to, look at something quite unemotionally and not judge someone, just genuinely say, how do I help you navigate this to get the best outcome?
Sometimes I worry that I'm too ruthless sometimes, because when I'm speaking to a client, I just know what the best choice is. And the best choice is this. And I say it bluntly and straight to the point, and they go, whoa.
But I think that's the benefit of having that experience and foresight. They can, in that confident, the decision you make,
Correct.
They can hear the
That's
confidence.
exactly where I was going to go next. Yeah, they actually really appreciate going, wow, like it's actually that simple. And I go, yeah, it's that simple.
I spoke to an elderly couple, a Greek elderly couple, about buying an investment property, and I said, what are you buying these for? She said, we've got 700 grand, we thought we'd put it somewhere. And I'm like, about my parents' age. I said, hold on, Harry's been working his whole life. Go retire. Go live in Italy or Greece for a year. What are you doing?
Wogs don't want to do that.
No,
but they want to work.
No,
They want to work.
Yeah.
That's what they
But
want to do. Yeah.
The client actually turned around and said, you know what, we've actually never had someone tell us that before. Yeah. We've actually haven't had someone tell us to not purchase something. Because if I'm looking at it from a traditional transactional perspective, sign the contract because it's another client. It's another dollar in the bank. And for the agent, it's commission. But I'm like, hold on, let's take a step back. You guys are nearly at retirement age. you're going to be paying a mortgage. Mate, go on a holiday. Go spend 6 months in Greece with your family.
That one little statement or question, like that could put them on a totally different course for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
But that's unreal.
Yeah.
That's
And,
amazing.
you know, they've just come back to me recently to redraft their wills because it's like, well, yeah, we are retiring. We're going to settle down. We're going to
Yeah, good.
leave it to our kids. So, yeah, I think that's actually a good point to finish on for all of us. So thank you for all your time. I hope you guys enjoyed it.
Thank you, Paulie.
Fantastic. Thanks for organising it.
No, I thought it was about time.